Sunderland begin their championship campaign with 4 consecutive wins and just 1 goal conceded thanks to a 3-1 victory at Portsmouth at the weekend. But West Brom shall be not too far behind the Mackhams because they've got 10 points from their first 4 as well. Sheffield United beat Watford 1-0 at the weekend. They're up to 6 points, but have accrued 8 and can technically be considered one of the pace setters. So too are Watford, the team they beat, ending the Hornets' 100% winning record. But Leeds United and Blackburn have 8 points apiece. So plenty to discuss then, discussing the pace setters on this Championship podcast. Yes, welcome along to this EFL Debate Championship podcast. Thanks for watching if you are, obviously, or listening. Get subscribed to us on YouTube and on Spotify because that would help us out a lot. And we'll see you again very soon. For now, I'm delighted to be joined by my co-host, Ollie Mann from the Sheffield United Way. I could see you giggling away in the background there.
I was just enjoying myself, Gav. I was just, hi, everybody. Thank you for watching. If you're watching,
I know. Oh, I've had a nightmare with that one.
Nah, we've all done it. We've all had those moments, mate. I think as well, I had a little chuckle to myself about the idea that we were an early pace setter. I really took a bit of joy out of that. I think we're about 12. But we take it where it comes.
2-point deduction, mate. So you've accumulated 8 points. So I guess. I guess that's kind of where I was thinking. But delighted as well to be joined by Scott Worrell of Leeds United and Graham Falk from the What the Falk Podcast of Sunderland. Good afternoon, gents. Really appreciate you joining us, if you're joining us. I'm going to start with you, Graham. I don't know if you're able to make it down to Portsmouth for that 3-1 victory, but great result for the Black Cats.
Fantastic. I've got to be honest and say that, Cardiff away at the start of the season, really difficult place to go. I know they've had a bad start, but you don't want to go to any ground pretty much away from home, and it can be quite a strong vocal place to go to. And I thought we put in a really professional performance, and then Sheff Wed's difficult, and then, well, they were difficult until, after the 20-minute mark, and apparently they're not. And then you think Burnley, well, if we beat Burnley, then we start thinking, hang on a minute. And then we did. So leading up to the Portsmouth game, I had Hugh on from the PO4 podcast, which I'm sure you know of, and it's been on before.
You've had him on a lot, haven't you, whenever you've played Portsmouth?
Yeah, I think he's the only Portsmouth fan I actually like. That's how it comes across anyway. But he was feeling like quite optimistic, as you do coming from League One. But I said, look, there's going to be a point when I think we're likely to concede. And I think Portsmouth was a difficult place because even if you go 1-0 down, you're going to probably stick behind the team. I remember what it was like when we got promoted. But then we just turned up and blew them away again. And look, as a Sunderland fan, getting excited feels as scary as anything because we're used to not really being that good. And once we get excited, things kind of like fall to pieces. But it's really hard not to be excited at the moment because we're not just winning games, we're winning them well, we're playing well. And if I'm honest, I'm sure we'll come on to it and the individual players. Some of those players haven't hit their potential yet. And that's really nice.
Certainly is, yeah. Talk me through, Graham. You've got a bit more of an insight into the fan base than maybe I have. When I put out my prediction before the season that Sunderland are going to win the league, which I'm not going to over egg the pudding here. I'm not going to go too, but when there were lots of Sunderland fans, probably more Sunderland fans responded saying no chance we're going to win than people sort of responding positively. That was kind of the feeling in the fan base. There was a little bit of realism or apprehension or whatever you want to call it. But I think Graham, in terms of the last 4 games, how has that feeling among the fan base evolved as you've seen it?
It's evolved a lot. I think, before the season, because I've done 4 preview shows of my own, and I think almost everyone's mentioned your prediction, which it's gone viral. But I think it probably did take a few people back because of the way that we ended the season. But I think it's the joy of being a football fan and also sometimes the negativity of being a football fan. We were awful last season. Like the back end of it. We did really well under Tony Mowbray, and I think for a long time Sunderland were doing well for a good 2-year period. Sunderland were doing that with occasional kind of like stops on the way, and then Michael Beale came in, and and things went really south, and it was like mistake after mistake. And whilst we were probably expected to get beat off Newcastle United, we don't like getting beat off them. That's negative. And then mix in Michael Beale and all the things he said and all the things that happened, which I'm sure people have seen. And then you bring in Mike Dodds and effectively give up on the season. In 2 months, you've sort of gone, well, we'll just do what we can. And you finish 16th, and you think, if this season's 2 games longer, oh God, like, where's this going to go? But I think we all collectively said, like, in the summer, look, if we can address, well, we didn't all, a lot of us felt if we could address the failings in recruitment, which was poor last year, get a bit of experience in, get the manager appointment right, and start the season well, there's no reason we can't look at top 10. But we've went and won 4 games on the bounce against teams that are not easy to go to. We've also sold our best player within that period. And you think, oh, is that going to be where things go south and Romain Mundle just decides he is just as good as Jack Clark in the last 2 games and we haven't missed him? And I kind of feel like there's something really exciting building. One result can change that. But I think for the more positive people in the fan base, of which I am not, I think people thought we could respond well if we sorted out the problems we had previously and we could have a good season. I'm not too sure people thought we could go on and go for automatics, maybe playoffs, if you're feeling really optimistic. And I think what's ended up happening is all of the positive feelings we felt from like the back end of the Mowbray first season going into last season has kind of came to its head this season in a really weird way. It's like we knew we had the potential to be real promotion contenders, but we were like, oh, but Chris Rigg's 17, Job's only 18, and have we got a senior striker? Like Mienda hasn't shown anything really. And all of a sudden, they've all just basically stuck their 2 fingers up at us and gone, no, we're really good actually, and we're going to win the league. But there's a long way to go. But yeah, the mood has changed a lot, and I think at the moment, I'm just really enjoying watching Sunderland, particularly, I'm sure we'll get onto the individual players, watching Job and, my God, Chris Rigg, what a player. It's really nice to watch the team at the moment.
Ollie, is Chris Rigg someone who stood out to you from the outside?
I mean, how can he not be the one who stands out to everybody from the outside? He's 17 years old. You expect him to come in as well. I think and obviously do correct me if I'm wrong because I'm looking at this from an outsider, but seems to be playing a little bit deeper this season from where he seemed to have come through when he was first making his impact last year. And so seeing that change in him, but also the way that he's, well, it's hard not to get excited. And I think as a fan, when you're seeing a player come through your academy that's then coming into the team and doing this, they're always going to be the player that you then hang your hat on and you say, yes, he's the player driving us forward. He's just been fantastic to watch. What have you made of that sort of evolution of him this year in terms of last year? Because obviously he played limited minutes last season, and yet he's just come in this year, hit the ground running. And like I say, it does seem to be in a slightly deeper role to what we would maybe expected him to break through as.
He's so it's a year ago today since he got his first senior goal in the league against Southampton, which is a nice thing to be speaking about. But when Mike Dodds brought him in, he kind of like shoehorned him into the right wing. He's not a right winger. He's like I would say he's like an 8. I mean, he can do what he wants. He can be anyone he wants. And I mean, Sunderland fans aren't going to like me saying this, but if I take my Sunderland hat off, I think I'm going to enjoy him for this year. And then maybe if he continues on that trajectory, unfortunately, he might go elsewhere.
On that point, Graham, I think you had to ward off European giants. I was going to say from across Europe. That's repeating. What am I on about today?
It's Monday.
They are watching.
Absolutely. You had to ward off European giants in the summer, and now he's producing this sort of form in the Championship. It's quite remarkable, and obviously that means that possibly in January, but certainly next summer, there is the interest in him is only going to intensify.
I think with Riggy, what's I've been, I wouldn't say vocally critical of the hierarchy. I've called out what I think has not been right about the hierarchy, from recruitment to other things. I think one of the biggest things they did in the summer was convince him, with whatever they're doing in the background, to sign a 3-year contract, because European giants from across Europe, such as Dortmund, were obviously interested. But what I really hope is that he sees a 2-year progression, or 2 years at Sunderland, first team football. Hopefully we win the league and get promoted and we'd never lose a game for the rest of eternity, fingers crossed, but that's not going to happen. Hopefully he sees wherever this season's going to be championship, and hopefully next season's more. Hopefully he sees those 2 seasons as something that he should do at 17, 18, and then when he turns 19, dear God, he can then go to, I don't know, Real Madrid, wherever he wants to go. It's up to him. But what I quite like about Chris Rigg is I've seen 2 comparisons during the weekend. Someone said, oh, he reminds me of like a younger Roy Keane. Someone said, oh, no, he's a Brian Robson. He's not. He's Chris Rigg. And that's the thing I like about him. I think he's going to forge his own path. He's going to forge his own career path and go to the clubs that he may go to. I'm just delighted that some of it's going to be at Sunderland. There's absolutely no way that boy will be playing championship football if he continues on the trajectory he does. But at the same time, to take the pressure off his shoulders a little bit, he's 17 and he's still learning. Everyone has dips. But I mean, I dread to think what I was doing at 17, but it wasn't what he was doing.
It's interesting that, Graham, isn't it? Because there's that theme of not wanting to be or not being compared to other footballers from the past, and I guess there's a similar theme there with Jobe Bellingham, where he's got Jobe on his back rather than Bellingham, which I felt was quite symbolic in a way, as he's somebody who's looking to carve his own path as well.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And look, I think Jude Bellingham's the greatest footballer that's ever existed. Like, I'm completely in love with him as an Englishman. I think he's like the best thing ever. But I love Jobe as well. I think the name carries something with it. You'll see, if you watch any of the videos of fans waiting photographs, that, the social media content that clubs do now, you just see kids being like, Jobe, 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 Jobe. Like, they just want to speak to Jobe. Like, my mum's granddaughter, not my child as it is, has like a shirt with Jobe on the back because it's Jobe. And there is that around him. But as a player, I think he's different. Like, for me, where Jude is quite cool, calm, and collected customer, Jobe's actually, I don't want to say a hothead, but there's some real passion there. He loves to thunder into a tackle. He strides in a really similar way to his brother, but that's more like the genetics potentially. I find it interesting that you had Crystal Palace sniffing around Jobe, but not Chris Rigg in the summer, because unbelievably, in my opinion, Jobe is one of the best midfielders in the Championship and could feasibly, within less than a year's time, play Premier League football. And I'm not selling him off because I hope it's with us. And I think he does as well, because he seems to love the fan base, which is an extra thing that we love about him. Mm-hmm. But he's not even the best midfielder he's not the best teenage midfielder in our team. Like, and that probably speaks volumes. And I think, Dan Neil was suspended at the weekend. I think Dan Neil's our best player. Homegrown, love him, captain. I think he's far and wide our best player. The funny thing about it is, if any of them get suspended, you go, well, there's Alan Brown. There's Dan Neil can come back in.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, if Dan Neil's going to come back from suspension, I don't know whether it's after just the first game after the international break or another one, but it's like you've got Rigg there, you've got Alan Brown there, you've got Jobe Bellingham. Who do you drop at the moment? Because Alan Brown's playing amazing.
You just can't. Like, there's when I ask questions for the podcast for the past 2 games, people have said, who replaces Dan Neil? Or does Alan Brown come back in, X, Y, and Z? And like, luckily for Alan Brown, Dan Neil was suspended, so Alan Brown could come back in. But Alan Brown, I mean, I'm sure Eliza Mayenda might disagree with me, but he scored at the weekend. He did a bit of a David Nugent on the line, if anyone remembers that, if anyone's old enough to remember that. But I feel like it doesn't matter. And the good thing about it is, last year, like, Jobe kind of tailed off towards the back end of last year because he was tired. He's never going to tell you that, but he was. Of course he was. He was 17, and you could see he was absolutely pagged. And you're like, I wish we just had someone we could bring in. And unfortunately, Corey Evans at the time was just coming back from like a long-term ACL. He couldn't really get in. This year, it's like you can change people around, and we've just signed a Ghanaian international in midfield that played Champions League 2 years ago. So you've also got that guy as well, and you've got a young Serbian that's just come in that can also fix. So whilst I wish there were certain areas of the squad that were a lot stronger, there is a really good set of players in that midfield there where over a 46-game season, you can just alternate. But at the minute, you cannot replace Chris Rigg, you cannot replace Job, and you can't really replace Brown. And I've just said, Daniel's our best player, but I wouldn't put him in the next game. He can't. The three midfield players are too good.
I agree with that. I think for managers, when you've got a formula that's playing well together, you don't want to disrupt that. You want to have a kind of meritocracy, I think. So I'm going to come to you on this, Scott. I'm sure we'll come to Leeds in a moment, but I just wanted to ask you for a perspective on Sunderland. Do you see Sunderland as a threat to your sort of top two ambitions this season, Scott?
Yeah, well, I think when the season first started, I see your prediction, obviously, Gabe, and I thought, well, I'm not sure on that, to be honest with you. As you mentioned, obviously, they do have an upcoming squad with a lot of quality. I didn't expect this from Sunderland, I've got to be honest. I knew they had a really good first year when they got into the league, obviously got into the playoffs. Then it tailed off last year, and I thought they'd probably be a team that competed for the playoffs this year. And I probably still think that, if I'm being totally honest. Just because I don't like to sort of try away after just 4 games. But I have been you can't not have been impressed with Sunderland. I actually really like the fullback that they brought in, Kirkin, as well. I think he looks absolutely fantastic. A few advices, though, that I would give for Sunderland based on us last year with Archie Gray and obviously with you, Chris Rigg. First of all, don't start playing him right back. We tried that with Gray, not the play. Do not put him right back. Second of all, enjoy him while you can, because these players just do go. I mean, if you don't go up this season, which still, I've got to be honest, regardless of what we're saying right now, I probably don't think you will. He probably will leave just because they've signed a new deal in the summer. We had Gray signed a deal at Leeds United like about January time, and then ended up going the summer anyway. So I would expect maybe there's something like a release clause in there like we had with Gray. I know Leeds have got a lot of release clauses, I get that, and Sunderland are probably running a much better way than that without release clauses. But no doubt about it, he will probably have something in his contract, I would have thought. The advice I can give you is that I do think Sunderland will probably be in around the playoffs. I don't think they'll be top 2 yet. I think there's probably definitely three teams stronger than them. But I would say enjoy Chris Rigg while you've got him.
Interesting. Who do you think are the 3 teams stronger than Sunderland then, Scott?
Well, you've got to back your team, haven't you? So I think we are stronger, genuinely. I still think Burnley, I know they've basically sold their entire team about 3 times over this season, the bench reserves, and I think the academy coach has gone as well. But I still think they will be strong, and I still fancy Sheff United. I like a lot of their business this summer, and I think they're strong. However, I've got to be honest, when you were talking about Sunderland's depth there, I looked at Sheff United's depth at the weekend, and Ollie might better tell us a bit more on this. I might just not know Sheff United's team, and I might be naive to the fact of how strong that bench is. But I looked at that and I thought that was dreadful. I've got to be honest, and I thought maybe my sort of opinion on Sheff United might differ based on that, because you're not going to keep a team fit all year. It's 46 game seasons. We all know there's competitions, everything's going on. Players pick up knocks, players will get injured, and as soon as I think they lose a few key men, I'd be interested to see how Sheff United and Chris Wilder can adapt to that, because I'm not 100% sold on them yet.
Yeah, you've analysed us perfectly, Scott. You've nailed that. Don't, Gab, I'll tell you what, I'll get off. These guys have got it. We'll see you later. No, that's exactly it. With United, we have got, I believe, as you've said there, I think we have got one of the 3 strongest starting 11s in the league. I'm not going to sit here and say that I expect United to finish in the top 3, and it's for that exact point of it takes 2 injuries for us to be in almost a crisis mode. You know, we've got, say, Kiefer Moore gets injured. You know, I recognise that this is playing the tiniest violin that anyone's ever had, but we have to put Ryan Brewster in at centre forward if Kiefer Moore gets injured. And I know most people go, that's a £25 million striker role, but he's a £25 million striker who scored 7 goals in 5 years. So, you know, it's not the position that I'd like us to be in if we can. Similarly, you know, the midfield looks stacked, but the reason it's stacked is that they all play. You know, you've got Hamer and O'Hare, Raksake, Vinny Susan, Arblaster. But if any of those are taken out of the team, all of a sudden you're playing academy players, people who come up, people you can't really rely on for that consistency. So it's exactly the concern is about how do we get that consistency into our team if injuries start to come together and take us down. So certainly that's something to keep an eye on with United, because that's what worries me. And it's why on deadline day I was frustrated to see a number of players leave without anybody coming in, particularly in defence. Austin Trusty leaves, and that leaves us with Harry Souttar, Anel, and Jack Robinson. And we have 3 centre-halves. And as a team who have spent the last 4 years playing 3 centre-halves every week, it feels insane to me that we've only got 3 out the club.
Well, where do you stand on Wilder? Because I think when I'm looking in as a Sheffield, not as a Sheffield United fan, as a Leeds fan, I look at him and I think I'm not sure. It might work because it's only sort of worked ever at Sheffield United for him. So if it's going to work anywhere, it's going to work at Sheffield United. But he's obviously failed at Middlesbrough, failed at Watford. Does that sit in your mind, or do you just think, well, that they're different because he's a different beast at Sheffield United? Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, it hugely sits in my mind, if I'm being honest, because there's always this nag. Back of your mind, there's the nag that says, actually, go back 12 months and there's only one club in the top 2 division in England who would have offered Chris Wilder a job, and that was us. We were the only ones. If he wasn't coming to us after that stint at Watford, the odds are he was going to League One. And so we have to be realistic about what that means in terms of where his standing in the game was, what his sort of tactical innovation was looking like, and how teams were buying into his plan. I think from the early signs this season, he has developed a plan A that looks strong. I think it's always going to work for him at United because the fans are always on his side. They're always going to be behind him, willing him to win. And I always say, whenever I have this conversation, is if I could pick one manager that was going to be successful with United, and you said to me, you can have anybody in the world and they will be successful, I'd want Chris Wilder because he just gets it. He is the man. And last time it was taken away from us, it still feels like, I recognise it's the same for everybody, but it felt like last time that ride we were on with Wilder was taken away from us and was out of our control when it went. Because pre-COVID, I went to Bramall Lane. We were 5th in the Premier League with a game in hand on 4th to go above them. I went back to Bramall Lane. We were finishing 20th. And it just, with a different manager. And so it feels like he needs this time with us to get back or to at least try again. And like I say, he's developed a new plan A, completely changed the system, developed wingers, sort of got a way for us to play, which is really good. But in-game management is a bit of a concern for me. And I'm sure we'll come to this with Leeds, Scott, because I think it's one of the complaints that people have a lot about Falk and the way that he takes games forward and where he wants to come to in terms of being able to adapt a game, say, after 45 minutes, an hour, if it's not working. But the things that stand out to me are this season, second halves have been a real concern for us. We just seem to step off the gas. We seem that when other teams make a tactical change, they step onto us. Maybe they've given us a bit too much respect at the start. They then develop their press. Say, instead of letting the ball come to midfield, they'll go and press the centre halves. We can't figure out our way around that. And we don't make changes until the 70th minute. That's just a consistency. And so there's something that's lacking from what he had when he was here before. He used to be able to change a game. He'd change system. He'd change our style so we could hurt teams. And he doesn't do that at the minute. So there's definitely some question marks about what he's got. But if he gets his plan A right, which he has done, then hopefully with the sort of starting 11 we've got, that's going to be good enough for us to at least challenge the playoffs. And I think realistically, that's still the target. We want to be in the playoffs. That's where we've got to be. I think given the players we've signed, the way that we've done our business, that's got to be the aim. And I think he should be able to get us there.
Do you think it's only playoffs? Because you've like, I look at some of the stuff you've done this summer and some of the players you've got, and I think you're going to have to be going at it this year. From an outsider looking in, I think you've got Raksaki on loan. He's costing you an absolute fortune. He's got a break clause in January. You've basically thrown everything you can at him. You've got Souttar on loan. You kept hold of Anel. You've still got Hamer at the club. These players, if they have good seasons like our players did last year, like Somerville, they will move on. And it is hard to get replacements in if you're not going to spend an absolute fortune. I've got to be honest. From an outsider's looking in, I think when you go down that first year, you've got to get yourselves back up, because the longer it goes on, the harder it gets. And I think that's probably where we are. But it's interesting talking when you're listening to Wilder, because the way you talk about him just reminds me of Leeds and Bielsa through and through. But no, it is interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, that on coming down, because it has such an impact. And you see that with the other clubs in the league. You know, you look at Norwich, you look at Watford, even to an extent, you'll be looking at West Brom with how their season goes this year. And you do ask that question of, actually, the longer that you're here, you're then stuck, because the players who you can get rid of, they leave. Like Norwich have lost so many of their key men because they've not got the parachute, they've not got the money to keep them around now. But also, you're holding their career back if they're staying with you. They've got to move on for themselves, and they'll recognise that and start to push for it. We will, if we don't go up, we will lose Anel, we will lose Hamer, we will lose Vinny Souza. We will probably lose Ollie Arblaster.
I think Anel could go in January, Ollie.
I'm shocked he didn't go in the summer. I can't believe he's still here, to be honest. I didn't think there were any chances.
You have some players like that, though. We had players last year that I were like, I can't believe we've gone down and they're still knocking about. Like, I thought Nonto for sure was gone last summer. This summer, most recently, I'm not as sure. I wasn't as sure that Nonto left, but the summer before, I was completely convinced of it. So you do get that, but the more you stay down here, I feel like the longer it goes. And it's also the parachute payments levels. I think you get something like 42 million in parachutes in the first year, 35, I think, in the second year, and then the third year it goes down to 15 million, and obviously the fourth no. So that drop between the second and the third year is just imperative.
Well, the third year, though, just to jump in, is only for teams who manage to stay up. So we won't have a third year. We only get 2. Because you get 2 if you go up and come straight back down, 3 if you stay up for a season and then come back down. And so I'm fairly confident that right now Sunderland fans are thinking, Jesus Christ, are these lads moaning about how much parachute money they get? This seems ridiculous.
I'm just starting to go, have we done it the right way? Was the 4 seasons in League One actually worth it? But I've decided it wasn't.
Graham, I'm just wondering, do you... with that, was it 25 million you got in the end for Jack Clark?
20. Well, 15 rising to 20. If I don't know,
a little bit on the short side, you might say. But I'm just wondering. So, considering that Romain Mundle is an in-house replacement, do you think there's going to be a few quid to play with in January if you're still in a good position?
I hope so, because I love Jack Clark. What a player. Just really, really fun to watch. And ultimately, we all just watch football to ail our crippling mental health, let's be honest. That's why we watch it. And I like to be entertained. And Clarkey was there's times when I've seen him just spin people and just destroy them. And it was really nice to watch. Best winger I've seen at Sunderland probably since Alan Johnson, which was a long time ago. But Mundle has provided 2 games where you think, actually, hang on a minute, we might not miss him. There was a lot of discussion from myself about you need to replace those goals. And Mundle just went, it's all right, I'll do it, and scored 2 and 2. I think what's interesting about the Clarkey move and where we could potentially use money elsewhere is that when we signed Jack Clark from Spurs, a lot of the reason, I wasn't in the boardroom at the time, but this is the whole shtick, was that they thought it was okay to sell Jack Clark for £1 million, because they felt they had a better talent in their under-23s, under-21 squad, which was Romain Mundle. And then he goes to Standard Liège, doesn't really play that much. We take him on board, and he looks... if he was meat, I wouldn't eat him. He looked that raw last season, because I'd be severely unwell. But, I don't know what it was. The Burnley game, he just was I'll do the Jack Clark things and I'll be really good. And he's just continued it. There's a long way to go. But if he could save us a bit of cash and then put a bit of cash elsewhere, it's interesting that we spent a reported 3.1 million euros on the young Serbian boy. In an ideal world, I would like us just to spend it on a senior striker, but there's nothing to say that Isidore won't work, who were brought in from Zenit.
Did you bring in the centre half in the end, Graham?
That's
what I thought possibly if Sunderland were going to sign, because you were quite well stocked in midfield, as you've outlined really articulately. But Dan Ballard started the season injured. You've got Luke O'Nien, who I rate very, very highly as a mentality monster. A little bit of a iffy moment.
Another.
I'm glad we'll let him off that.
You said we conceded a goal, by the way. We didn't. We scored it past us. We scored it past ourselves. We just thought, why not? Great header. It's very much an 09ism, which he occasionally does. But we did. We brought in Chris Mepham. I'm pleased someone mentioned that in the chat that no one else can see, because I completely forgot that we signed him, and he's quite good.
Yeah, no, I completely forgot that. So,
well, you see, I wanted us to sign him, and so I'm not forgetting it. I'll hold on to it till January.
See how he goes, and you can have him if he's not that good.
Absolutely. Graham, give me, how are you feeling about the rest of the season? Excited, wanting to stay a little bit level-headed? How are you feeling about the rest of the season and Sunderland's chances?
I think because my day job as a journalist, I need to be balanced as I possibly can. So there's a part of me that goes, like, calm down, just chill out. It's all right. It's only 4 games. There's another 40 odd games to go. Just calm down. And then there's my fan head that just goes, just get really excited. Like, we're going to win every game and we're going to be up by February and it's going to be fine. I think the truth is probably somewhere a little bit in the middle. A good start is imperative to any team that wants to get promoted, whether you expect to go up automatically or whether you don't, whether people expect you to go up automatically or whether they don't. Winning 4 games immediately puts you in you can potentially do this, especially when they're hard games. But there's an element of me that remembers parts of last season where the younger players sort of ran out of steam a little bit and were probably overused. Mm-hmm. But then there's another part of me that goes, well, hang on, Job's had that season. Dan Neil's now in his 4th season. He's experienced now. We brought in Alan Brown that adds a bit of experience. Okay, Chris Rigg might drop off a little bit because of his age. But on my end, I might drop off a little bit. But what if the boy who brought in from Zenit St. Petersburg does really well? There's all that kind of stuff that goes with it. So I think I'm trying to temper my own expectations, but it's actually hard to do. So if I'm honest, I feel like we're going to go on an invincible season, probably. And win every game, probably for the rest of eternity. But on a serious note, I think what a massive waste it would be if this good start didn't at least get us in the playoffs. What a massive waste that would be. I'm confident that it won't be. And I haven't even mentioned his name yet, but a lot of the negatives from last season have been fixed early doors from what looks like a very competent, smart, clever manager that's been brought in. And that really helps, because if you look at our lineup, there's not too many players that weren't here last season. There's Alan Brown and, off the top of my head, Serkin's back fit again, which is a massive plus. Mm-hmm. But it's a lot of the team that it was last season. It's just more tactically astute than what Mike
There's
Dodd
a real pressing structure, isn't it? Which I didn't really see from Sunderland last season. And I think that the individual talent was always there in spades, in my opinion. But it just needed a bit of cohesion, a bit of someone to put it all together. And the pressing, I think, has made a massive difference. So, really exciting season ahead for Sunderland, I think. Graham, thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time, and keep up the great work on the What the Falk pod.
Thank you very much, Sheff. Pleasure to speak to you all. And hopefully we win the league and I get to come back on in May.
Absolutely. Let's hope so.
Cheers,
Graham. Take care. So, Scott, I want to come to you on Leeds. 8 points from your first 4 games. 2 points a game you're averaging. Happy with that stat?
Yeah, really happy. I think when we went to I was at the Portsmouth game in the first week, and I sort of, you worry, don't you, straight away when you get for me, in a game which we should be winning, we don't win. But I think since then, I've been really happy with the results. And actually, when I look back at the Portsmouth game now in more reflective mode, rather than a sort of emotional withdrawal in the game, we should have won the game easily. Like, on another day, we'd have won 3 or 4. And we started absolutely unbelievably in the first 20 minutes. With a bar in the first 10 minutes 3 times, and it just didn't sort of go for us. Melier threw one in his own net. They scored a worldie. And then we give away a silly penalty. And then that's your 3 goals. And then all of a sudden, you're fighting to get a draw. And we still nearly won it at the end. So I think if you look at that and you go, well, besides that, actually, a draw away at West Brom is absolutely fine. I don't have an issue with that. The performance we can talk about in terms of the way I just didn't think we had proposed any sort of threat going forward. But I think in terms of result basis, the draw away at West Brom is absolutely fine. And then obviously 2 wins away at Sheff Wednesday, which I think, regardless of what Leeds fans are telling me that actually they're garbage and they're all this, I think it's the first time they'd lost at home since we last beat them. So they're not a bad team at all, Sheffield Wednesday. And I think they will beat a lot of teams at home this year, because they're just Danny Rowe's a really good manager. They're really well oiled. So I think that was a really good win. And then obviously we're backed up again with another win at the weekend. So yeah, I'm really pleased with how it's going, to be honest. I really am.
The big thing that stands out to me, Scott, is that the moves are starting to flow a little bit more than perhaps we saw from Leeds last season. There's a little bit less individualism. And so while there's a trade-off where you've lost your star quality of Crescencio Somerville and Archie Gray, you might say, and possibly Jorginho Ruta, it feels like there's more of a synergy about the way Leeds are playing. And I guess you've got to give Daniel Farke some credit for that.
Yeah, 100%. I think part of it as well, when you've got a sort of star player, like we had the best player in the Championship, in my opinion, last year in Crescencio Somerville, and Rutter went far behind that in terms of a sort of unique ability that he had and unique skill set that he had. I think sometimes the team naturally, because we're all humans here, you just funnel it to your best player. When he's so good, you like just giving the ball constantly, and we don't sort of put together great attacking moves. And I think sometimes it can punish you. I remember, I don't know if you remember it, a few years ago, Spurs had a record where Kane wasn't playing, they were actually a better team. And I sometimes wonder if we've sort of fallen into that mold. Now, that's not because Kane's a crap player and because he wasn't a good player for Spurs. It's because sometimes, actually, when you just funnel it to one player, you become really predictable and you become a team that actually, even though they start doubling up on them, and then even though they're sort of so good, they can't really do anything. And we saw that sort of the back end of last year where we got found out a bit. And I think this year, without, as you said, without the sort of star names, naturally as a team, you just explore different avenues to sort of create moments. I do think we have got individual quality anyway this year, and I worry we don't end up going to the same path. Like, I think Solomon, for me, in terms of a caliber level, is one of the best players probably in the division. I think the question behind him is he can stay fit or not, because I know we're paying him an absolute wedge. So if he does stay fit, I think he could be a player that fires you up on his own. I think he's that good. But I worry that we'll start again.
Early days with Solomon, though, right? I mean, you've got him on loan from Spurs. I'm not sure what his. I've not done loads of digging on his career history other than Spurs, but is it a bit early to maybe start talking about him as one of the best players in the division, unlike Somerville, who, because I thought it was a lovely run and great trickery, I guess, in the lead up to the goal and a great cross. But I'm just conscious of going a bit early, possibly.
Yeah, well, obviously he was at Fulham before at Spurs, and he was absolutely tearing it up for them for a while. And then obviously he got his Spurs move that summer. I think the problem has always been with Solomon is he's got a quite considerable injury record. So it's going to be the simple situation of keeping him fit. And I think to do that, you're probably going to have to just make sure he's rotated constantly. If we were at 60th minute, we're winning the game and he hasn't picked up a knock, get him off. We don't need to keep him on the pitch. And I think that's where, when we've got the depth that we have in Ramrazani, Nonto and James as your four wingers, which for me is probably the best four sort of quartet of wingers in the league. I think, in my opinion, you've got to rotate well and you've got to protect our players when you can, because it is, as we talked about, is a long game season. But I do believe, genuinely, caliber-wise, he for me, I've sort of, you can see quite quickly, can't you, the level of players. And I think I'd seen it at Fulham before. He scored a worldie against us when we played him in the Cup a few years ago. And yeah, I think he probably is caliber-wise one of the best.
Do you know what? I might have to hold my hands up on that one, because I knew he was on loan from Spurs, but I didn't know he had this history of playing for Shakhtar Donetsk and tearing it up for Fulham in the Premier League. So I thought it was just some lad on loan from Fulham. So my apologies now. Must be better. Per D on the report card there for Sutton. So talk to me about defensively for Leeds then, Scott, because I did think, although you kept a clean sheet against Hull at the weekend, there were a few chances that could have that Hull were able to sort of carve you open.
Yeah, 100%. I think overall defensive we've been really solid, and I think genuinely Struijk. I was talking about video yesterday. I can't believe how good he is. He's unbelievable. Honestly. Like, do you know the way Van Dijk plays in the Premier League, where he's sort of, it looks so calm and in a way, way too easy for him? Well, Struijk, and they call him at Leeds Virgil van Struijk, which I know is a bit cringy as it is anyway. But the point is, in the way he plays, he reminds me, like, it's literally a carbon copy this year. I don't know how to describe it, and I can't remember him being this good before. But I'm watching him, and I'm like, he hasn't got a fault in his game, and I think he's a massive bonus having him back fit, because playing Ampadu in there for me never really worked because he had the tendencies to come into midfield. Like we actually lost the final because Ampadu comes into midfield, think he's a midfield player, doesn't get it, and then they get the spacing behind for Armstrong to score. So I'm so glad that we've got Ampadu back in the midfield as well. Is a bonus, but he's obviously come back, which is a massive bonus. We've now got balance in terms of we've actually got right backs at the club. We're not playing a sort of even though he was a genius of a 17-year-old kid, we had a 17-year-old playing right back last year, which we don't have this year. We've now got the depth of Voba as well, who is in the Austrian team, had a really good season for Mönchengladbach, and I think we've got really good depth there. And overall, genuinely defensively, we have been really good. And we conceded 3 against Portsmouth, and that's what everyone will look at. But actually, if you watch the Portsmouth game, if we're being totally honest, they should never scored 3. It wasn't a 3. Like Alice said, they scored a worldie. Meslier threw in his own net, and then we gave away a stupid penalty. Now, the penalty one's fine, but the other 2, they are just like moments of genius, but also
I would argue actually Hull, who didn't score at all, created better chances than actually Portsmouth managed. I would expect, if you looked at the XG, I would expect Hull actually had a higher XG in the game.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they did as well, because they actually, in fairness, my mate messaged me after and said, how are Leeds doing? He's a Leicester fan. And I said, well, to be honest with you, we're playing all right on the ball, but we're getting hit in transition consistently. And they are starting. Liam Miller, I thought, had a real joy against Bogle in the first half, especially. And the big striker,
effort, wasn't it, from Liam Miller?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, and the big striker sort of gave Roden a bit of sort of a lesson, really, as well.
Is it?
Yeah, that's it. He played really well, in my opinion. I think it will probably cause a lot of defensive handfuls, and he did to us. I think in the second half we sort of neutralised that. To be honest, I don't think it was as anywhere near as many transitional moments. But yeah, you are completely right. Hull, I think after the game, I heard a lot of Leeds fans saying it was a really professional performance. I didn't sort of share that view, I've got to be honest, because I thought professional performance is where you win 2-0, but you don't win 2-0 by conceding a load of chances in transitional moments. You win 2-0 by just sort of being really solid defensively and just picking him off eventually, almost like you'd expect from Man City or someone like that. So I didn't think it was the sort of professional performance that got made out to like it was against Sheffield Wednesday. But in the same breath, we got the job done in the end, and we did neutralise it in the second half, and it was a much better performance in the second half. So yeah, I'm not worried about my defence at all, really.
Coming to you on this, Ollie, I mean, do you see Leeds as serious contenders at the moment? Because the way they're playing, we've seen them be absolutely lethal on the counter-attack, as they were at Sheffield Wednesday, but we've also seen them unlock teams at home, like against Hull, where, there's been the flowing passing moves. And I'm just wondering, they look like a dangerous side, and Scott's not overly worried about the defensive issues, despite some lapses against Hull, but it's looking good for them, isn't it?
Yeah, I think they're the outstanding team in the league. I know I said at the start of the season in our predictions that they were going to win it. I still think they're going to win it, if I'm being entirely honest. It's one of those where they've got... I think when you look at the team, we were just talking about some of the players there, and I think, they're still got a team that is more than most teams in the Championship are going to have. You think about the depth that they've got. It's not like 1 or 2 injuries are really going to derail that. And so certainly they'd be my pick to be... Well, I think they're the ones to beat. I think anybody who finishes above Leeds will be playing in the Premier League next year.
Well, I'm delighted to be joined. Sorry, do you want to say one more thing?
Yeah, I was going to just mention on that. I think the depth this summer is a huge thing. And I've talked about it on my channel quite a bit in terms of the depth of the team. Because like last year, I think we were sort of like a Galactico team where we had loads of superstars, but we didn't have a balance of the team. Like we didn't really have a number 8. We didn't have a right back. Now we've got 2 right backs and 2 number 8s, and we've got a backup centre half as depth as well. So yes, maybe we don't have the sort of unbelievable technicians like we did last summer, but what we do have this year is a much more balanced team where we've got the likes of Tanaka and Rothwell that can play in the number 8. We've got obviously Gruev that can play there too, like he did at the weekend, and we've got 2 right backs. For me, pretty decent right backs for this level as well. Ollie can probably tell a bit more about Bogle, but I think he probably is, in terms of calibre wise, one of the better ones in the league. So yeah, I think there's been a lot made of obviously Leeds losing all the big stars, but I think there needs to be a bit more made probably about the depth we've got, because it is quite strong. We have got 4 really decent wingers at this level again, and we've probably got a backup in every position that's probably would start for majority of Championship teams, which it should lead to a considerably good season in my opinion.
Let's hope that's the case. A bit of a less obvious strong starter is Blackburn Rovers. So I'm delighted to be joined by Jolly Ollie from TikTok, or Ollie H. Collins on Twitter. Ollie, thanks so much for joining us this evening. Just wondering, what do you feel is behind Blackburn Rovers' strong start to the season?
Eustace, I think we spoke about this last time, Gabs, really. Back in the last season, came in, We had an indifferent results, but you can't argue with the performances that we put in so far this season. We had the blip during the week against Blackpool, but to come away from your biggest rivals with what is a very, very credible draw with 10 men for more than half an hour, basically not giving Burnley any chances. Look, I never would have assumed Rose be in this position. I said many times before that because the lack of quality, because of what's happening off the field with the ownership model, I've not a lot of expectations for Rovers this year. And I'm trying at the moment, and I think all Rovers fans are, to keep grounded, because to be within that top half or top six of the championship already is probably quite mind-blowing for most of us.
Certainly is. I'm just wondering, in terms of that attacking threat, you've scored in all your games so far this season. Would you say it's been Yuki Hashi that's the one that's really stood out for you so far?
Yeah, he's got bags of energy. He started against Oxford the previous week, and I don't think, he was playing. I think he comes into games better when the defence is a bit more tired, a bit more lagging, and here comes on a guy for a good half an hour, and he's willing to run the channels. He was ineffective during the week, like most of them were in the League Cup against Blackpool, but that's a different entity. We can put that to one side now. But even when he came on against Burnley with 10 men, he was closing down their defence. He was getting out the midfield. He was getting Travis up a bit more further. It was a great performance. And look, it's not just Owashi. It's coming from everywhere. We've got goals in that squad at the moment. And that was the main thing that Eustace wanted to get out this year. If you are going to lose a 33-goal man, okay, and, we know how important he was because he got half our goals last year. We need goals from everywhere. And that's the level, and that's what Eustace is as. And they've all stepped up so far. So long may it continue.
Ollie, that's Sheff United, Ollie. That's the exciting thing about Blackburn, isn't it? Because in previous seasons, we've been talking about them as having one-star striker, whether that's Jordan Rhodes, Rudiger Stead, Adam Armstrong, Ben Brereton Diaz, Sammy Smodics. They've always seemed to have this one goal scorer that scores all the goals. And this year, the early signs are that they're really spreading around the goals nicely, and that does bode well for collective performance.
Yeah, completely. And I think it's one of those things where that's how teams really do start to shine, where you really see the differences between a team who are potentially viewed as overperforming from the outside to a team who you think, actually, this is going to be more consistently. Because if you can spread those goals out and get that level out of so many different players, yeah, it's a really good sign. It's also a sign, I think, of a really well-coached team. I think that's where you see the value of a manager. When you have an individual who goes on a fantastic run, say Sammy Smodics getting 33 goals and sort of 60% of the goals that the team had scored, you say, yeah, that's fantastic. We've got one player and he's really performed above the level. Whereas when you spread those goals out, you see that the goals are coming off the left wing from Hedges, from Vyman, from Gay. You're starting to say, actually, this is a well-coached team that know how to create chances. You see repeatable patterns that sees different players understanding their role perfectly to know how they can hurt the opposition. And so, yeah, I think that's a really promising thing. I think the one thing that you need to learn from, though, Ollie, is, of course, we've seen this before. Just please don't sack John Eustace and hire Wayne Rooney.
Look, we're not Birmingham. We're not Birmingham City, are we? Not. We're not that naive, unfortunately. Look, I must put this out there, kind of thing. Vyman, for me, I was told that this guy was pottering around the Championship. He was slightly dead weight, according to Bristol City fans. And do you know what? He's got I think he got 3 goals last year for Bristol City. I could be wrong. The guy's just got so much knowledge, got so much nous. The goal he got the other day, I don't think could be attempted by another player on the pitch, personally. It's dropped to him, it's going away, he's hit it. Even the Burnley fans were going away. It was hitting the top, it's hit the back of the net. And do you know what? It'll be in Rovers folklore now for quite a long time, which if you get a goal against Burnley, you do anything against Burnley in the folklore anyway. But yeah, look, we've also been here as Rovers fans before where we get early pace setters or up the top and it falls away. There's something about Eustace which I like, which is, I said a couple of weeks ago that when we go a goal behind, we do struggle. We won against Oxford the previous week. Now, people argue against the opposition we've had, but against Derby, Oxford and Norwich City, Derby won 2 at home. Oxford won their games at home. I get it, the new starters, but you can only beat what's put in front of you. I like the battling commitment. I like the fact that if we go behind, I trust Eustace now to actually change the formation, to put things right, to go in a bit more attacking. Because last year, the one thing that was missing when we were playing teams at the back end, was somebody else rather than Sammy Simonics. And now I've got full confidence of our bench, the people that brought in. I think, especially with Cantwell, if we get the Todd Cantwell that was in Norwich City, then I think Rovers can. I don't want to say we're going to be playoffs. I think we'll be a lot more settled team and a lot more competitive going forward.
Scott, what have you made of Blackburn from the first 4 games?
Yeah, no, I've been really impressed. I'm like, I think we all are. I really like John Eustace. I think he's a really top manager, and I think he's really good at adapting to the situation he's put in. Like at Birmingham, he wasn't really dealt him an amazing hand, and I think he had him obviously in the top 6 when he got the boot, which was a crazy decision and still is a crazy decision. I think some of the Rovers fans, from what I know, were a bit disappointed with sort of Eustace, especially at the back end of last year. Just the lack of goals in the team and other sort of key problems. But I think we've talked about it a bit sort of regarding Leeds United, where maybe when you lose a player, people step up and you maybe become a bit of a better team and you start finding other ways to get around it. And I think that's what I've seen from it. Even in the first game I watched you when you played Derby in the first game and won 4-2, the sort of amount of chances you create in that game. And I know Derby are not the greatest defence in the world, but I was really impressed and I saw a massive development there from Blackburn, who, to be fair, I haven't watched tons of in the previous year, but I watched them against Ipswich a few times and a number of other games. But yeah, I genuinely think you stick with Eustace, you'll be absolutely fine. I'm not sure quite you'll be playoffs, I've got to be honest, but I think top half is definitely an achievable goal, especially with a manager like him. That's sort of where I stand on it, really. I
mean, this is the same John Eustace that made Leeds cry last season, but that's a different entity thing, really. But anyway, look, no one's got... Look, I will agree. When he first came in, I've heard a lot of people on the podcast, a lot of people talking and saying he was kind of underwhelming. But I need to say this to Rovers fans: what expectations do you have of a club which is not really doing great off the field, and we still live by this trophy we won 30 years ago in the Premier League? You know, be it we won something. Look, I think he's the best manager at this current time for Blackburn Rovers. I think for the players he's got. I know sometimes last year, I'll be honest, we lost games and he come out with the same rhetoric. I think I said this to your last guy about, I want the lads to be working together, the togetherness. And he sat there going, what is he on about? I tell you what, you can see that there. Kyle McFadden, God bless him, was on the sidelines against Burnley, 37-year-old defender, telling that defence what to do. He's installed such a good unit at the moment. And if you would have seen the fans at full time, and I'm sure you saw on the TV as well, Rovers are bought into what he's doing at the moment. Really, really bought into what he's doing. And do you know what? Hopefully he can make us a bit more formidable going forward. But I totally agree. I don't see Rovers being in the playoffs. I think we'll set the bar low because that's the best place to be. But do you know what? If we might be the people that come up from the pack, we might be the people that flirt with it. But from a Rovers perspective, and if you speak to most fans, no one's got any expectations this year of probably being in the top half. So, where we are at the moment, we'll take it. Let's move on.
What do you think regarding your centre-back? Because when I've looked at your centre-backs, I think the starters are actually okay, but I think as soon as they sort of depart, there's sort of, unless you, I'm not 100% sure on your transfer business in the summer, but I remember watching against Blackburn and sort of looking at your bench and thinking, sort of as soon as them starters are not there, there isn't really anything left at centre-half. What is that something that's been addressed?
Yeah and nay. I mean, we've got Danny Bath in from Sunderland recently. That's, I think, mainly Hayden Carter was injured for most of when Eustace came in last year. Came in at the back end and we did look a bit more solid. That's been the main part. I mean, Eustace has been a defender, so as long as he doesn't play sort of Gareth Southgate football in the end, then we'll be okay. But I think Heim, Carter, I think we had Owen Beck at left back, who had a formidable debut. And the first 10 minutes, I said to some of the lads there, I said, you know what, I reckon the whole occasion's got to him. I think a lot of our players it did. But when you add the tag of the new Andy Robinson, that's a lot to live up to. And he did incredibly well. But no, I think defensively, there might be some minor suggestions that if we were to be a man down. But, Kyle McFadden's a great player to come on. I think 37, I doubted him. I said he needed a Zimmer frame at times last year and we bought him. But at games, yet again, the back end of the season, he came up, he showed his worth. He's a great unit. He's a knowledgeable person of the game. So that might be something to address in January. But I think if you were to look at our squad at the moment, and I posted something on Twitter recently, list of each players. I think we've got 2 people to a man in each defensive. We've got O'Connell, who's in the youth setup, who we got from Crew. So there are options. There are options.
Rawdon, what you got from Crew.
Yeah, that's the one. Sorry, my apologies.
Yeah. I think. I think with Carl McFadden, he might be okay in a Zimmer frame because it's just a case of he can still bark out orders and head the ball away. So no problems there. Ollie, thanks so much for joining us and giving us your insight on Rovers. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, cheers, lads. See you in the playoffs.
Top man, Ollie. Get following Jolly Ollie for those of you on TikTok. Just before we go, we're going to listen to Sam Ucko of WD18 fans on Watford. Here's what he had to say after the 1-0 defeat at Bramall Lane.
Hi Gab, Sam here from WD18. Just here to talk about Watford's start to the season and yesterday's frustrating defeat to Sheffield United away. Now, immediately, if I take a step back and think about the start of the season that Watford have had, if you'd offered me 9 points out of the first 12 and 5 wins out of the first 6, including the Carabao Cup, I think every Watford fan would have taken that, considering a lot of us were dreading the season, thinking we could be in a relegation scrap. And I wouldn't rule that out because it is so early in the season, but it's been a fantastic start to the point where yesterday almost felt a bit like a free hit. That being said, I did feel that we could have got at Sheffield United a bit more and been a little bit more aggressive and a bit more on the front foot. We didn't have a shot on target really, and the closest we got was Ryan Andrews hitting the post. Bio had a chance in the first half as well, but like I say, I think Sheffield United are going to be up there come the end of the season, and the fact that Watford went toe to toe with them for 90 minutes and we come out frustrated that we didn't pick anything up, I think it's testament to how far Tom Cleverley has taken this Watford team in such a short space of time, because I think a lot of Watford fans probably would have expected to get blown away at Bramall Lane come the start of the season. It was a sort of tense game. It blew over at the end. I think there's a video that's gone viral already. Daniel Jefferson didn't respond too well to the boos that he was getting in the hostile reception. But yeah, I think Sheff United will be up there come the end of the season, and there's a lot to learn for Watford from that game, and I'm sure that Cleverley will make sure that the players do learn from that. Probably the 2 big elements that I think Watford needs to look at for after the international break. First of all, we start games really, really slowly. We've conceded twice in the first minute of games, the Derby game and the Sheffield United game. And to be honest with you, even in the other games, Stoke game, the Millwall game on the first day, the Derby, like I said, the Derby game before, we did start those 2 games really slowly as well. So that's an area that needs to be looked at. And also, while he scored 2 goals against Stoke and he scored in the first day against Millwall, I think Eddie Keane being that 10 role, I think is a potential weakness for Watford. Teams seem to have worked out how to get him out of the game a bit more. I think it might be time to see Rocco Vata or Quadro Bar come into the side instead of him. But look, I think it's so much to be positive about Watford-wise at the moment. The end of the transfer window is really good. Festi Abaseli coming in, Daniel Jefferson coming in, Angelo Ogbonna coming in as well. Bags of experience there. So yeah, plenty to look up towards. I think the international break has definitely come at a good time for Watford. We looked knackered yesterday, and it's just 2 weeks now to bed the new players in ahead of Coventry at home after the international break. Another tough game. I know they haven't started the season quite well, but I think they're characteristically slow starters under Mark Robbins. So yeah, hoping that Watford can bounce back and onwards up Tom Cleverley's Yellows.
Sam Ucko there from WD18. Ollie, what did you make of Watford when you saw them on Sunday?
Yeah, they're an interesting side because, as Sam sort of referenced, obviously there was a lot of talk about them being relegation candidates, them being down at the bottom of the league at the start of the year, and obviously they've started really well. I think it's really difficult to assess a game when sort of you have that own goal in the first minute, because you really feel as though from there you'd want to see Watford kick on, take myself out of the United zone. And you think you expect to see a team really kick on, a team that's putting the other side under pressure. They've come into it with a lot of confidence, a lot of momentum, but that never really happened. They never really penned us in the way that other teams that we've played against so far have done. I referenced earlier that as games have gone on, United have tended to wilt a little bit. And when you change your system up a little bit, you sort of raise your press. We've got quite a few weaknesses that are identifiable through the team where you can really force us into silly mistakes and pen us in our own area where we just cannot get out and we can't create the space. Watford never really took advantage of that. They had moments where you thought, okay, this is getting a bit nervy, but it never had that inevitable feeling about it that, say, the QPR game had. From half-time onwards, you just knew they were going to score, whereas you never got that from Watford the other day. And so I think they probably need to look at the top level, their fullbacks. I think Raksaki against Larouche, if it were a boxing match, they would have stopped it about 20 minutes in, because he's just not got that one-on-one defending. You know, we had Larouche last season, and I think Watford fans have been really impressed with him because he started the season fantastically. But what I saw on Sunday was exactly what I expected to see. A player who's out of his depth when stood up one-on-one by his winger, a man who actually, when you've got somebody who's got tricks in front of him, he's going to commit himself too early, he's going to leave himself exposed, and he's actually going to cause you a lot of problems coming down that side. I think it was Morris they had as their left centre-half, who actually was covering for him for the majority of the game, and actually looked quite good. I think that partnership will work quite well for them, but you've got to make sure that they found a way to address that. I think on another day, United, if we had a striker in form, let's say a Kiefer Moore who's in full form, I do think United would have won that game a little bit more comfortably. I think we had the chances. I think despite being behind for as long as they were, it was United who looked more likely getting the second goal. But I still think, again, as we said about sort of Blackburn before, I don't think Watford are going to make the playoffs. I don't think they're going to be a team who, in April, we're having a similar conversation. But I think a positive start should raise expectations a little bit. It should give them confidence for the season ahead. And it should see them aiming for that sort of mid-table, upper mid-table sort of positioning, because they've got some very good players. And actually, when you see them, that check for Tedzi, for example, had a really quiet game. But every time he got the ball, he was the only one who you thought, hello, okay, there's something here. And so I think there's got a lot to look out for Watford. But yeah, don't let the expectations get carried away. Laugh at the people who mocked you at the start of the season for sure, but don't get carried away with it, because I still think there's going to be some difficult months for them as things start to go forward.
Yeah, only 4 games in, plenty of football to be played. Just a matter of 42 games left. I wanted to ask you, Ollie, just coming back to Sheff United, that relationship between Callum O'Hare and previously it's been Gus Harmer, but actually forged a nice bit of link-up play with Jezron Raksaki on loan from Crystal Palace, and they look like they're dovetailing quite nicely at the moment. I
love Callum O'Hare, and when we signed him, it was very much a conversation of, I didn't know how much I was going to love him. I was like, I'm either going to love him or I'm going to hate him, because he's got his socks down low. He can be a little bit petulant. He can go down a little bit. And I thought, there's a chance that coming off the back of a really embarrassing relegation, this is just not going to be the vibe I wanted. It turns out it's the exact vibe that we needed, because he just looks a fantastic player. And I think the role that we've got him in really helps him to work with both Harmer and Raksaki. I think what we'll see is the way that he receives the ball, he's trying to bring it central and he's trying to drag space. So you'll see him, I think he was helped out at the weekend, as I say, by the positioning of Larouche, because it meant that Raksaki, generally speaking, had some space to be able to play in, to be able to create that opportunity. Other games, what we've seen happen is that, say, Harmer or O'Hare swap positions. So one starts on the left, one in the centre. They then drag the centre wide and then sort of try to swap around so that it's as flexible as possible for us in attacking positions to try and create those chances. But it's his strength as well. It's his vision to find that space, to make the space. But his strength is what I didn't expect. I think it was QPR where he just completely bullied the defender to create a goal, and you thought, I did not expect him to have this in him. So, yeah, I'm in love with Callum O'Hare, and I think any partnership he makes will be one that I'm fully on board with.
Yeah, he's strong. He's also really such a nifty ball carrier as well. But I also, I look at it, Ollie, you get some players in the Championship where they stand out great individually, and they can really carry a team through some difficult times, but you wouldn't say they make players around them better. For me, Callum O'Hare, players like Gus Harmer and players like Jezra and Raksaki, they're better for playing alongside Callum O'Hare. It's not like he's hogging all the limelight and they're sort of on the periphery. He's bringing them into the limelight from the periphery. That's the difference for me.
We saw Raksaki against Barnsley, I think it was, where, you know, against League One opposition, you really thought he was going to tear the game up. You thought, well, here we go. We're going to really have some fun here. But he wasn't able to find that space to get into the game. The midfield, the players around him were too slow in getting the ball out to him. So generally speaking, we sort of knocked it around in midfield a little bit. And by the time Raksaki had made his run, come back onside, made his run, come back onside, made his run, come back onside, he's receiving the ball towards his own goal, and almost where he's dribbling, he's either being forced into traffic through the middle or back. So he's always having to look for an overlap or somebody else. What you saw on Sunday and what Callum O'Hare is so good at doing is doing the pass at the right time. He's driving you forwards. He's not slowing it down. He's not keeping possession for the sake of it. He's always looking to try and play forward and use the space that teams are giving you in transition. And that's where we were looking to hurt Watford. And that's where we're going to get the most out of Raksaki. And that's where, like you say, O'Hare is the player who's going to make the others around him look so much better, attacking-wise. Admittedly, defensively, when the going gets tough, I don't think he's particularly helpful at all times. But he's the kind of player that if he's, I can't think of the word to say, if he was faster, there's not a cat and else chance he's playing in the Championship. That's the one thing that holds his game back, is that when he gets the ball in transition to break, the reason that he's so good at finding that pass or looking to bring the teammate in is because individually he's not got the pace to take it and just run with it. And so it's both probably the reason that he's playing in the Championship, but also the reason that he stands out so much.
Yeah, I think I do, that he probably does have that limitation. But for a footballer to be able to get the best out of your right winger and your left-sided midfielder and make them both better, like, I think that's just insane, like, level of contribution, really, and being a team player. Scott, you pretty excited about Sheffield United in terms of what they can do if they keep their first 11 fit and fresh?
Well, excited might not be the phrase, because I'm excited for their downfall, really, if we're being totally honest. Apologies for that, Ollie, but it is the truth.
Fine.
But yeah, no, I, as I said, I genuinely think they've got some of the best players in the league playing for them. I really do. I think Raksaki, everybody in the league probably wanted. I know we apparently bidded 15 million. I don't know how much truth's in that, but apparently that is the sort of situation. And I actually think probably right now, him is probably the best player in the league, in my opinion. I think he probably is. So I think he's absolutely top draw. I was interested where you're talking there about Callum O'Hare, because I've got to be honest. Yeah, I think he's good, and I think he's got. There's a lack of players at the Championship level who've been totally honest, who've got the ability to see a pass. I just think the lower you go down, the harder it is to find them sort of players. When Callum O'Hare can do that, I've always been questioned if he does enough of it, to be honest. And does it actually, for his quality? For me, his numbers are not sort of, and I know everything's not just based on goals and assists, I get that. But for a player of the quality that I think he has got, I'm surprised that the lack of sort of contributions he does actually get to the team. However, as you said, if it makes other players better and it means that their numbers are inflated, then that's absolutely fine, because it doesn't matter as long as the team's winning. But yeah, as I said, I think you're in a good stead with Sheff United. The only concern I have genuinely got is about the sort of depth that you've got. And I actually think it's quite interesting when you mentioned, Ollie, that you sort of struggle in the later parts of games. And that's what you've seen with teams' lack of depth, because they're not making subs because the subs are not good enough. So then you've got a choice. Do I keep playing the lads that are knackered while they're all making subs? Or do I bring the subs on, who are then obviously the quality drop-off is seen? So if that's something Wilder can correct in terms of naturally usually the further you get into the season until you get to the end, the players' fitness do improve, because there's nothing like match fitness, really. So I'd question maybe for the next few weeks if you can get that sort of where they can do 90 minutes. But yeah, I think besides the depth, your first 11, if you keep that fit, for me, you nail top 6.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly it. And that I did a video on our channel the other day about sort of why do we have this sort of, why do we get worse in the second half? What is it? And it's exactly that. It's the depth issue is the key part behind it, because clearly we don't trust the players coming off the bench. When QPR pushed onto us and changed their style, we didn't trust, say, Sidney Peck. We didn't say, actually, Callum O'Hare's not involved in this game anymore, because they've bypassed him by stepping forwards 20 yards. And so now that we're on our back,
sorry, Ollie, Sidney Peck's meant to be really highly rated, though, isn't he?
Oh, Sidney Peck's lovely. Sidney Peck is a lovely footballer, really good player. And I think, if he continues on his development and is able to get first team football, then completely he's going to be a superstar. However, I think he's played 7 games in the EFL in his career. And so at this stage, if we're talking about a team that want to be finishing in the top 6, top 2 of the Championship, you can understand why Chris Wilder's saying, actually, with 30 minutes to go in a game where we're completely under the cosh, I'm not going to take off Gus Harmer and put on Sidney Peck, because as good as Peck is, he's just not got that game now. So he's not maybe got that physical development where you want to be trusting him in those moments. And so that all comes down to the depth. You know, beyond that, you're looking at people like Ismaila Koulibaly, and don't get me wrong, he has moments, but I wouldn't want Ismaila Koulibaly coming on to change a game if I were Wickham. Never mind if I'm Sheffield United looking to try and drive us forward. Don't know why I decided to just sideline Wickham there. Sorry, Wickham fans, if you're still with us. But, you know, sometimes you've got to drive by teams. And so, yeah, it's all about trusting the subs we've got. And if we don't do that, then we'll burn out at the end of games, which will cost us points, but we'll also pick up higher rate of injuries, which will cost us following games. And so finding a way to trust those players off the bench, whether that's just getting them tactically ready to come in and contribute to a system. We've seen before, players who aren't at the level can still contribute in a well-drilled, highly tactical system. So if you can get those players trained in it, ready to produce in it, they can do 20 minutes. Because they're professional footballers still at this stage. But you've got to trust them, but you've also got to get them coached well enough to be able to do it. And ultimately, sign some more in January.
Are you getting the best out of like certain? Because I look at the team, I've got to be honest, and I look at the starting 11. Obviously, you've got Raksaki plays on the right hand side, but and you've got Callum O'Hare sort of plays sort of a number 10, doesn't he? Where does Hamer fit in the team? Like, how are you getting him in with sort of in a sort of makes sense way as such? I know, are you sort of pushing up Burrows and then Gilchrist is coming as a third centre half? How is Sheff United adapting to that? Because it just, when I look at the team, it just looks hideously unbalanced.
Yeah, it's a team that does look unbalanced. And I expected us to bring in a left winger before the end of the window. There were massive rumours about Mikey Johnston coming to us, but obviously he chose West Brom. Obviously he's got a history there. He's played for them before. I think as well, we were probably juggling a little bit with the money because until the takeover goes through, we're still in a little bit of a sort of halfway house in terms of what we can spend, how we can produce that money coming together.
Miller was there too as well, wanted Liam Miller, I think. You were looking
yes, he was another one that we were linked with quite strongly right at the start of the window. But it's, so it definitely feels as though we are unbalanced at the minute. At the moment, it seems what we're trying to do is use the left-hand side to draw the defenders in. So we'll try and have O'Hare and Hamer, where they transition into the centre. They both play almost a similar position in terms of coming central, which either gives them the opportunity to play the space for Raksaki or gives Burrows the opportunity to try and get down beyond the last man, which then does see either Gilchrist sitting or Vinny Souza drop a little bit deeper because he's capable of just sitting in those positions. I think ultimately, if you're smart and you watch United, there is a way of figuring us out.
That's what I was going to my next question.
Yeah, that's the question. Is you pack the central area so that there's no space for O'Hamer and O'Hamer. I'm just going to call him O'Hamer. That works. So there's no space for O'Hamer to play in.
What's wrong with it?
Yeah, let's just go. So that if you create a sort of a packed central space so that there's no space for O'Hamer to play within, you can then make sure that there's just no opportunity for them to get that pass, that intricate little play. You can then probably expose the space behind Burrows. So, for example, playing against Leeds, I am terrified of the idea of those four wingers because either Burrows goes forward, commits himself in attack, you win the ball back sort of as we're high, but you've got so much space to play down. Say it's Dan James running on that wing. We're just not catching him. There's nobody coming in. Yeah. So how do you get back in time to cover that defensive position? So there's definitely a concern there. And so what we've got to try and do is make sure that when Souza is sitting in, he's capable of doing that without leaving us exposed in that space. So I think we definitely are a player short. We needed a left winger. So if we were changing anything about the starting 11, that's the only one I think we're missing, because it does create this unbalanced system where we're so reliant on Burrows' sort of runs forward that we're potentially really exposed defensively. Then on the far side, because everybody else drifts centrally, it's almost as if a defence could almost, if you go man-to-man on Raksaki, you've just limited the space entirely. You know what we're going to do in terms of coming inside. You can afford to say to your defenders, actually, step right. If you're going to pack the central and then tell one of them to step right, you can double up on Raksaki, knowing that if you've got a defensive-minded winger, you can cover the run of Burrows. So I think we have created an opportunity for teams to be able to almost crowd us out in the way that we're designing our attacks. But there is positive still to it because it's repeated patterns. And I think it's the thing that Wilder did so well at United the first time is it's what I was trying to say around Blackburn before, is if you can create a repeated pattern of play in which you can score a goal, then you can do that continually against any set defensive structure. It's what really held us back in the Premier League last year, and particularly under Hecky overall. Hecky did a great job, but we relied on the individual brilliance of Illiman and Dye and never created a repeatable tactical structure which created us a goal. And so we are going back to that and getting sort of clear lines and patterns of play. Mm-hmm. So there's pros and cons to how that works, but I am a bit concerned about that sort of imbalance to our attack.
Yeah, I think when you were talking there, for me, that's when you're talking about the way you're playing and you're going to end up packing the midfield, that sounds fantastic. But I'll be interested to see how you fare against a team who just put everybody behind the ball. Because a lot of teams, if we're being totally honest, are going to go to Sheff United this season and just play a low block, put 2 banks of 4 there and play on the break. And they'll be quite happy with the draw. It's the same at Ellen Road and it was the same at Sheff United as well.
Yeah.
And I'll be interested to see how you can operate, because I think some of the downfalls we had last year actually was that some of them will come inside on the from the left, none to coming around the right, and we just pack out a midfield, and then we didn't have really anyone flying round the corner to offer sort of an option going wide, which sometimes is what you need to do, especially when you've got a striker like Kiefer Moore up front as well. It's even more imperative. So I'd be interested to see actually when maybe Blackburn, for example, go to Bramall Lane, if you can find a way to break teams like that down, or if you're just going to sort of get it, because it's not as bad at the start of the season because teams are a bit more ambitious. When it gets to the later end of the season, it's a bit nervous, and you get to half time, it's 0-0, and you haven't broken down yet. Then can Sheff United figure a way out when they've got such a sort of obvious way of playing that everybody knows, and they're going to pack out the midfield? That's where I'll be interested, because sometimes you just need a man to beat someone, like we had at the weekend with Solomon Way. Just beats a man down the line, gets the ball in, and we score. Sometimes you need something like that, and I think with the way you described it there, I didn't actually think of that before, but that strikes of like a low block just is going to kill you. But I might be wrong.
Well, Derby at home next, and I think that'll be the quint. I don't think there'll be more of a low block test than Derby at home. And so we'll see.
That's
whether
so bad though that you might be all right.
So, really interesting chat on Sheff United there, and bigger tasks to come, I think, but a really encouraging start on balance. I wanted to come to you, Scott, just before we leave, because we've only got another 5 minutes or so, on West Bromwich Albion, because they've got 10 points from their first 4 games. A lot of doubts over West Brom in terms of the quality of the squad going into the season with some key departures, but Carlos Corberán, one of the best managers in the Championship, and he's making it work by the looks of things.
Yeah, I think you know what you're going to get from West Brom. I think every season, everybody said they're going to be in the top 6. I think that's where I think most people have them. I know I do. I just think Corberán's that good that he actually can coach a team pretty much no matter how bad they are into the top 6. I mean the Huddersfield team, as soon as he left, they were fighting relegation, and they were relegated. So I think Corberán is just such a wild card and such an ace card that they've got there, that I think they are probably nailed for top 2. I think, again, with West Brom, my issue will be with them, I don't think they're going to score enough goals to get in the top 2. I don't see them being there. I think the way they play, yes, it's fantastic at sort of neutralising teams, and yes, they're going to win a lot of games 1-0 like they did last year. But can they go and win the big games? Like they didn't beat us, and we were there for the taking, if we're being totally honest, and they drew the game 0-0 because they just didn't have that extra bit of quality. And as I think, as you mentioned, Gabe, I just can't. That extra, sometimes you can't do it all, managers. They can only go so far, and I think especially the way they play as well, I think goals are going to be a problem for them in terms of maybe breaking down low blocks. I think that could be a problem, but I think you have to win big games. You've got to beat the teams. If you want to be at the top 2, you've got to beat the teams around you. And I'm not sure they're going to be able to do that, to be honest.
Yeah, I think though, building on that conversation we just had about United, their wingers, especially one-on-one individually, have got some real strengths within there. Obviously, they brought Mikey Johnston back, who had such an impact last year. But Tom Fellows is so good, and he's really a player to keep an eye on. But obviously, as well, in terms of scoring goals, they've got Josh Madger scoring like it's sort of 2019 Netflix documentary. Do you know what I mean? This is how it goes.
Yeah.
Josh Madger, genuinely. Do you think he's going to keep this up? I just don't think he will.
Interesting. I think he might. I agree. I don't think it's a squad that's oozing with creativity, I wouldn't say. But I think John Swift is probably the midfielder that they're probably going to rely on for creativity. What I thought was really interesting, actually, is that when they pressed for, I think it was the goal against Swansea, you actually had Jason Malumbi ahead of Swift. So Swift was actually dropping deeper alongside Moat for sort of to be a bit of a second ball player and sort of uses Malumbi's energy in the press, which I thought was really helpful. And he certainly linked up with Madger. And that's the big thing for me. I think Madger's link-up play and his involvement. I think when a striker's involved with the game, then, you can make some allowances for whether or not their form might fluctuate in terms of goals. But really, really like Josh Madger. And I think Tom Fellows could have a really big season this year for West Bromwich Albion. Listen, gents, thanks so much for joining us on the Championship podcast this evening. Ollie, thank you so much for being my co-host once again. Everyone go check out the Sheff United Way. Also, you can also follow Scott Worrell and subscribe on YouTube. Plenty planned coming up, Scott, I imagine, for you with you.
Yeah, I just somehow find a way to make a Leeds video every single day. I've done it for about the last 150, 200 days. I think something like that now. And I'll continue to do it for a long time. If I'm on holiday or wherever I am, it might not be the greatest video in the world, setup wise, but I will be there making a Leeds video. So there we are.
Well, that's worth a subscribe, surely. Go check out Scott Worrell's stuff. This has been the EFL Debate Championship podcast. Thanks to you for watching, if you have been watching. And we'll see you again very soon.